If you were asked to think of notable crusaders, likely candidates would include Richard the Lionheart, Raymond of Toulouse, or Frederick Barbarossa. Very few would ever think of King Sigurd I of Norway, who was in fact the first king to personally go gallivanting off to the Holy Land. Norway, which was currently going through a period of independence from Denmark, had converted to Christianity in the late 10th century. By the time of Sigurd I's reign, which he shared with his brother Eystein, the kingdom had been Christian for over a century. The Scandinavian world had a pretty poor relationship with Rome, but the first monarch to personally take up the Pope's call to arms was of course Sigurd. You should be aware though that there is still some debate as to whether or not this was a crusade or a pilgrimage. Sigurd left Norway in 1107 to begin his journey to Jerusalem and stopped off in England in order to winter there. Sigurd left early next year without burning the country down or conquering it, which was a nice change of pace, and headed south to Iberia. And Iberia was, at this point, divided between the Christian realms to the north and the numerous Islamic ones to the south. Sigurd's fleet sailed to northern Iberia and took refuge in Jakob's Land, otherwise known as Santiago. The lord of the city allowed Sigurd to remain and purchase whatever food he needed until the winter came, when he changed his mind. As such, Sigurd agreed to leave peacefully, and just kidding, he sacked the city and stole all of the food anyway. They passed Norversund, nowadays called Gibraltar, and made their way to the Balearic Islands. And it was here that one of the most important parts of the Norwegian Crusade occurred. You see, the Balearic Islands were also Muslim-held, but geographically important too. They were, for the most part, safe havens for pirates, but were also major centres in the Mediterranean slave trade. They had long been a thorn in the side of many Christian kingdoms, mostly due to raids on their coastlines, and so when 5,000 Norwegian crusaders turned up, it didn't bode well for the islands or their inhabitants. Upon reaching the first island, Sigurd and his men defeated the pirates there and stole all of their riches. The Norwegians then moved on and raided the rest of the islands, barring Majorca, which had a sizable population as well as some decent fortifications. Sigurd's exploits here were circulated around the Mediterranean Christian world and weakened the island's ability to resist the future Christian conquest. After this, the fleet sailed south to Sicily, where they were welcome to stay for the winter. In 1110, the fleet finally reached the Holy Land, and Sigurd was greeted by the King of Jerusalem, Baldwin I. The Norwegians in the end remained there for several months and received many relics and gifts to return home. Sigurd also notably aided Baldwin in the conquest of Sidon by blockading the city's port. After this, the Norwegians made for home, but they didn't go back the way that they came. Instead, they opted to head home via the great city of Miklagard, or Constantinople as it's known, to visit the Byzantine Emperor. Once there, Sigurd gifted his ships to the Emperor before making his way back home over land. Sigurd returned to Norway by 1111, where he was granted the epithet the Crusader. And thus the Norwegian Crusade was now over. And whilst it isn't a well-known historical event today, at the time Sigurd's adventures were widely circulated and celebrated around the Christian world. He set the trend of kings personally taking part in a crusade and continued the trend of seaborne Norsemen turning up off your shores and just taking what they wanted. I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching, with extra thanks to these patrons you can see on screen for their continued support. And an extra special thanks to James Bisonet, David Archaeologist, Azarka Flash, Danny Maloney, Party Boyko, Kulin Castleman, Rob Waterhouse, Chris Wicker, Gustav Swan, David Silverman, Winston Kaywood, Christian Cheke, Maggie Paxkowski, Lexi Schwinn, Anthony Beckett, Robert Wetzel, Sky Chappelle, Ike, Spinning 3 Plates, Aaron the White and Michael Reynolds.